Well, hello and welcome to today's Vermont Hops Power Hour webinar. This will be the last webinar in the series, and we are thrilled that Erica Cummings, who runs the UVM Extension Quality Grains and Hops Testing Laboratory, has joined us today. My name is Deb Haliba, and I've been providing assistance to the UVM Extension Northwest Crops and Soils program. And so before I turn the mic over to Erica, I wanted to provide a few quick housekeeping reminders. First, we are very grateful to the Northeast Sustainable Agriculture Research and Education Program, SARE, for funding support for this project. We are recording the webinar today and we'll be providing the URL to the recording to you later on this week. As a reminder, our session is scheduled for 60 minutes. Today, Erica will give her presentation and then we'll have some time for Q&A with her. And then Scott will be providing some of his observations of this year's growing season, and we'll open up the mic so you can share your observations too. Okay, so now I'll turn the mic over to Erica. Erica Cummings is a Crops and Soils Coordinator with the University of Vermont Extension Northwest Crops and Soils Program. She also started and manages the UVM Cereal Grains and Hops Testing Laboratory in Burlington. So Erica, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks, Deb. Hello, my name is Erica Cummings. I run the hop quality testing program at the University of Vermont. I'm going to talk to you today about hop quality testing and a few things you can do to minimize reductions in quality during post-harvest handling. So I don't need to tell you that hops require a lot of inputs to get these little shoots all the way up to maturity. So don't let post-harvest handling reduce your hop quality. So what degrades hop quality? Well, exposure to light and air, moistures above 10%, and the storage temperature. So what you can do to ensure the best quality possible is harvest your hops at the correct moisture, get those hops into a dryer as soon as possible, and after they're dried down to 8 to 10% moisture, bag or bale them and get them into cold storage as soon as possible. So leaving dried hops out, especially on a humid day, can significantly increase moisture. I've had more than one grower say, oh yeah, I totally got it down to 10% moisture, but when I went to process those samples, they were wet. And I'll show you a slide later on about what that looks like and how I know. So this is just some more examples, like bag or bale, seal it, and get into cold storage. So to submit a sample for analysis, the forms are available on our website. I think Deb's going to post that link right now. And a couple things, when sending in a sample, you want to overnight it. Ideally put a cold pack in there. Write hops on the outside of the package so that we know that that sample has to go into the freezer as soon as we receive it. Do not overnight on a Friday because there's nobody here to get those samples until the following Monday. So your sample will be sitting there for 3 days. If you're going to drop off a sample, which is completely fine, you just want to let us know so that I know that I have to be there because we want to get your sample in the freezer as soon as possible. So we test for alpha acid, beta acid, and HSI, or hop storage index. So I've gotten a lot of questions about hop storage index, or HSI. So I'm going to take a little bit of time and talk about that. Most people know the alpha acid is the bitter, beta is the aroma. So yeah, HSI is the one that we get a lot of questions about. So what is HSI? Well, the definition is it's the alpha acid potentially lost in 6 months at room temperature, and this is based on bales. So it is not predictive. So this means that if you damage your hops during harvest, it can then affect the entire future of the crop. So you can't say a cascade will act this way over 6 months' time, because if the cascade hops was damaged early on, it's going to affect it throughout. So as hops age, the alpha acids decrease, oxidation increases, and HSI increases, and that's bad. So in general, you're looking for an HSI of 0.230, and it can vary slightly by variety. So in 2014, our group did a little experiment with nugget hops. So this is, you can see what the original concentrations were. And we stored them at one of three temperatures: room temperature, the refrigerator, or chest freezer. And you can see the alpha acids degraded significantly at the samples that were at room temperature, where the freezer stayed about the same, and the refrigerated samples started to degrade slightly. So when you send us in a sample, we test as is, meaning what you send in is what we test. We do not have the ability to dry your samples. And as you can see, we have a very sophisticated way of grinding our samples. So when you send a sample that is wet, this is how I know that it's wet. It looks like this, and it literally grinds out like Play-Doh Fun Factory. Not only do we get a good workout in our upper arms to grind this sample, but as you can see and imagine, it definitely reduces quality because there's so much more friction. The sample just doesn't look good. On the opposite end, we can also have samples that come in too dry. And basically all of the lupulin just kind of falls out. And we brush it out and get as much as possible, but as you can imagine, it definitely will impact what your quality is at the end. So this is ideally what we would like to see. 8 to 10% moisture. You can see the grind is pretty much consistent and it's easy to work with. So we use the ASBCA method for analysis. So what this is a toluene extraction. So we measure out 5 grams of sample. We then shake it. This is the shaker, and we keep everything in the dark as much as possible. So we add 50 mils of toluene. It's then shaken for 30 minutes. We use alkaline methanol as the diluent, and they run it through a spectrophotometer at different wavelengths. And then we have a database that then calculates alpha acid, beta acid, and HSI. So since we are currently working through the 2017 samples, I have 2015 and 2016 samples. So in 2016, we had 79 samples. The demographics are down here where they came from. And this is the lowest and the highest of the alpha acid, beta acid, and then compared to industry standards. So I'm going to just take Cascade as an example. So as you can see, we had a lot of variability within Cascade for alpha and beta acids. My guess with this 1.4 and this 0.7 is that the samples were wet when they came in. So the quality was severely impacted by the wetness of the sample. We've also found specifically in Cascade that we get very high, well, not always, but we sometimes get high readings. And I'm going to share a slide that Rich Michaels presented at the Hops Conference this year. This is for New York samples, but they've also experienced that, and I've also talked to other companies that do hop quality analysis, and they've also found that. And so our best guess is that this is actually not Cascade, that somehow a bind got clipped, and what we're thinking is Cascade really actually isn't Cascade. It is something else. So that is, I think, all of what I have. So does anyone have any questions?
Well, great, Erica. Thank you so much. So if you do have questions, just a reminder, you're going to type it into the question box and hit return, and we'll get that and read it to Erica. If you're on a mobile device, you'll just go over to the little question mark and click on that, and that will get you to the question box as well. So just to clarify, Erica, there is one question in the question box, and it says, when you mention bag, you bag the hops for sampling. What do you use, a plastic, or can you just go over those sampling procedures?
Sure. Typically what we do is ideally you would like to get a vacuum seal bag. That is going to minimize the exposure to air the hop is going to get. So ideally you want to, we use, that is actually a picture of our, vacuum sealer. So ideally, I mean, you can use like a much smaller version of that, but ideally you want to get all the air out that you can.
Great. Can you test pelleted hops?
Yes, we can. It's a little bit different in processing. We actually use a magic bullet to break up the hop pellets, but other than that, it's all the same.
Great. What other analysis might someone do to evaluate hop quality?
For hop quality, you can do oil analysis, which we are not currently able to do. There are several labs throughout the United States that are able to do that.
Okay, great. Let's see. I think that's all we have in the question. Oh, here's another one. What is a basic analysis that brewers are looking for?
Usually it is alpha, beta, and HSI.
Okay.
And sometimes they have started asking, I don't know if they like most ask for it, but I know there's been a lot of talk about oils, like a total aromatic oil content, which we've starting to look into as a possibility to do here.
Okay. And do you need to freeze your hops for sampling?
No, we take the dried hops, vacuum seal them, and then get them into a freezer.
Okay. Any other questions for Erica? Okay, here we go. That slide that you showed, Erica, concerning the non-cascade hops, what was the phenomenon this year? Where did the cascades come from?
Well, we've seen it actually every year. We've seen some cascade samples that just test very high for alpha and beta acids that are not in the range. And I've sent those samples to other labs to test. They've gotten the same results. I've heard folks in Colorado they've had the same phenomenon. I'm not exactly sure where the rhizomes came from, but it is thought that it's most likely that these are not what they say they are.
Okay, so you mentioned that do not send samples on a Friday because they'll get here. But is the lab open year-round, or when can we test?
It is. Yep, it's anytime you want to send it. We are open now year-round.
Okay. Any other questions? Just waiting a half second in case folks have questions.
Hi, Erica. This is Scott Lewins. I have a question.
Yes.
So I know the state is now starting to or planning to do testing for cannabis in Vermont, and I know some of the same terpenes in cannabis are present and desirable in hops. And so I'm wondering if any of the linalool or limonene or any of the other terpenes that the state could test for is something that we might be able to do down the line.
It depends. From what I've looked into thus far, this distillation process is pretty time consuming and would allow us to do basically one sample a day. So we're kind of looking at how we could actually make that happen, or if it's even feasible to have that happen.
Great. How about, can you remind us, Erica, what's the minimum sample size you're sending into the lab?
We'd like a 100-gram sample, ideally.
Okay, great. What about genetic testing? We are trying to figure out why our cascades do not look or test like cascades.
Right. So there are a few places that will test genetics. I believe there's somebody in Kentucky that does it, but we have also, I've had several people you know, and it actually has been specifically for Cascade. I will look up to try to figure out where it was that was discussed that might be able to help in that identification. I don't believe Alpha Analytics has that. We looked into it at Alpha Analytics, and I don't think they are able to do it to variety. But I will double check on that and get the information to put up on the website.
Right. So we'll post if we're able to identify that information. We'll just post it right where the hops webinar archives are, right on the hops page. Okay. Any other questions? Otherwise, we'll turn it over to Scott. All right. Erica, maybe if you could just page forward on your slide. Hold on for just a sec. There we go. So now we're going to do a little harvest and end of season wrap up. So we have Scott, actually, and Heather are both on the line. So Scott, do you want to go first?
I'm happy to. Thank you very much, Deb. What I wanted to do was share with everybody some of the common challenges, excuse me, that growers were reporting throughout the season. So as you're aware, we've been running this project throughout this season. We've had surveys every few weeks, and some of the common threads were obviously dealing with the weather. Certainly the wet weather that most of us, if not all of us, we're dealing with this year led to a number of issues around downy mildew management. Early season with spikes, later season with downy affecting the cones. And so a number of people reported to us challenges with dealing with downy mildew, asking questions about downy mildew management. And so that's something that all of us were dealing with. Another issue probably related, at least in some part, to the wet weather, where folks were dealing with managing their fertility. And so again, people were asking a lot of questions or reporting issues that I attribute to the wet weather that we were dealing with this year. The weather probably contributed to a number of people's concerns about weed management. Certainly weeds are not only a problem when we have wet weather. The potato leafhoppers are an annual problem, one that the leafhoppers, that is, migrate up every year. This year they were here a little bit earlier, and because of the warmer weather, we had multiple generations, and so the leafhoppers were an issue for a longer period of time than we would normally see them. And then the last thing that people, well, some people at least, might have been dealing with were aphids. And we had some serious aphid outbreaks later in the season up in Alberg, and you may have seen the blog posting we put out about aphids. Again, the aphids themselves are not a problem necessarily, but it's the promotion of sooty mold in the cones that become a problem. So I'm curious if other folks were dealing with that aphid problem as well. Again, those are the challenges that we saw on a broad scale across all of the participants throughout the season. Certainly, if you guys have other issues and reported them to us, we tried to address them in our various Hops Power Hours. But I'd love to hear from folks that are attending this webinar if there were other challenges or how they dealt with these challenges that we all had issues with this season. So we can, as we did in the last Power Hour, if Deb, you can manage to open up the lines to allow folks to ask questions about practices, about challenges or to share solutions that they've had to these issues that we're all dealing with. That'd be great.
So this is Heather. Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oh, good. Okay. I just wanted to chime in a little bit too about some of these challenges and how this might play out into next season, especially in regards to, you know, the significant stress that a number of plants were under this year in regards to Downey mildew. So one of the issues we saw in a few yards, especially in old stands, so the UVM yard, and at least two other folks that I talked with that had stands of hops that were, you know, between 7 and 10 years old, was that, you know, Downey mildew couldn't even be controlled at all right out of the starting gate. The plants were so badly infested, impacted, and set back that really the best management at that point was to terminate the growth. And, you know, our older stands are weakened or can be weakened if they're not well maintained over their lifespan. And just, you know, being in the ground for nearly 10 years, some of these yards, a year like this, they just couldn't kind of hold up to it, it seemed. And I think we know a lot more about Downey mildew management now and hop management in general. But I think just a word of, you know, caution to folks is to, you know, keep on top of the Downey mildew management, keep those yards as healthy as possible. All these pieces are connected. So, you know, if plants are overcome by aphids, leafhoppers, weeds, Downey mildew, poor fertility, not enough water, you know, it puts stress on the plant in general. And, you know, when that happens, just the plants get weakened, and that kind of stress year after year, you know, at some point the plants are just, I don't want to say giving up, but to me this felt like the year that they gave up. And it was really clear to us in our hop yard. So again, be really prepared in 2018. Be doing what you can this fall to make sure those plants are going into the winter healthy, you know, making sure phosphorus levels in particular, that's a Downey mildew management tool to keep the roots healthy, is where it should be. And I would say watch David Gent's webinar again. It was excellent that he gave first thing in the season, so that you're managing that Downey mildew, because, you know, it likely built up this year in your yard. So just a couple things on my end anyway. I'm done now.
Great. We do have a question in the question box, and it is, did potato leaf hoppers affect the northeastern hop growers in the 18th and 19th centuries? Do we know the answer to that question?
Yes. I think the first paper that was, I mean, I'm sure they did for sure, but there was a publication in the 40s that came out of Cornell that talks about potato leaf hoppers on hops. You know, again, the varieties may have been slightly more resistant. I'm only saying that because the varieties here may have been better adapted to our region, where the varieties that we're growing primarily here now are adapted to other regions that don't have potato leafhopper pressure. So that could be part of the difference. We do know that some varieties are more susceptible than others. So there's not a lot of papers on it, but there certainly is one major paper that came out, I think, in 1941 that talks about leafhoppers in hops.
Great. And just so folks know, I did, you had mentioned, Heather, David Gent's presentation, so I just popped that into the chat so people can have a link to that. Ooh, what are some of the, here's another question. What are some of the more important considerations around end of season maintenance or practices?
So, end of season management, I think, get a soil test taken, make sure that the phosphorus levels in particular, I believe David Gent talks about this in his presentation. They add phosphoric acids and such to the hops, and a lot of that is to protect and feed the root system. And so that's part of it. Trying to clean up some of the residue. You don't want to clip the plants way back this time of the year. And I think in some ways just really being ready for next season. Really be out there scouting when those shoots are coming out of the ground. If you're crowning, make sure that gets done. It'll be critical next year for yards that are old enough to have crowning performed. So, we had a lot of stress, and I think just making sure that you're able to be ready to deal with the aftermath of that next year. The only stress we didn't have this year was water stress.
It's interesting, Heather, this is Scott, that you mentioned that we didn't have water stress. And one thing that would go along with that is we also didn't have any reported issues with spider mites this year. Again, if you remember, spider mites do really well during hot and dry periods, typically associated with when we would also be dealing with water stress. And so, again, for next year, something to consider is that, because we got a reprieve from the spider mites, we don't want to forget about those guys.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And what I wasn't prepared for personally, and I really should have been, was the aphid outbreak that we had at the UVM yard. Excuse me. It was, we were well into harvest, and actually kind of wrapping up harvest. And so it was the last few varieties that were taken out of the yard, but I just could not believe the level and how quickly the aphids sort of came in and did damage to the hops. So that caught me off guard. It really shouldn't have, but again, I think that's why we're trying to get you folks out there scouting very regularly, because something like that can, that your crop could have looked great and that could ruin it in just, days time. So that was really a bummer. And I'm not sure about their overwintering. Scott, you may know more about that, but they seem to come when it's cooler and wetter, which they certainly came. But I don't know if, that means we'll have bad aphid problems next year or not.
Yeah, I don't know a huge amount about aphids, but I do know that they overwinter in prunus species. So these guys don't overwinter in your hop yard, but they'll actually head out and look for things like cherry, and they overwinter in those woody species, and then next spring will migrate slowly out of their overwintering habitat into our hop yard. And so certainly one tool would be to try to think about your landscape that your hop yard is embedded in, and if there are prunus, that is trees and shrubs in the prunus genus, you might consider removing them. You're not going to eliminate your aphid pressure entirely, but you might give yourself a head start, because it takes a little bit longer for them to get in. There's one other thing I wanted to note. This doesn't apply to everybody, but there was a question about the late season management, and if you have a first year yard, your management might be slightly different. So Heather, do you want to mention how folks who have a first year yard who maybe didn't harvest might want to do something slightly different than folks who would have a mature yard and have removed the bines?
I think the big piece is in that first year, you're really trying to build up the crown, the root system, and build up plenty of energy. And how you do that is by essentially getting some above ground growth, but allowing the root system to become well established. So one of the things I think you don't want to do, and really this is kind of in most yards, but especially in a first year yard, is you don't want to tear down all the growing material, because that's how it's actually, you know, building some of its energy below ground. You can cut that material out, but I would wait, you know, well into the fall, which I guess we're well into the fall, even though it doesn't feel like it, because the plant will translocate the energy out of its above ground biomass to the below ground biomass, you know, essentially just like any of the other plants that we work with. So you don't want to get too anxious and cut all that material down, you know, right away, but it's probably this year not a bad idea to make sure that if there's quite a bit there, that you're hauling it out of the yard, so that you're not contributing to more disease buildup, you know, next year, and insects and other pathogens. One of the other things I noticed again this year, which I think is kind of a perennial issue in the Northeast, are late season diseases that seem to be colonizing the cone. And this, you know, includes Alternaria and Fusarium. We see the browning kind of on the tips of the cones. Originally, we sort of just kind of played it off as Downey Mildew, but quickly realized that it actually wasn't, most of it wasn't Downey Mildew, that we had done a good job with sort of our fungicide management to control Downey Mildew, but these later season diseases were coming in, especially once we stopped spraying fungicides to control Downey Mildew. So they come in, you know, right at the very end, right before you get ready to harvest, and they can, or they seem to be able to really cause a significant amount of damage, especially in some years. And, you know, that was really no different this year. We saw quite a bit of Alternaria out in the hop yards and Fusarium. So I think that's something we need to look at into the future, is how to minimize loss, quality loss mostly, I think, and visual appeal from those pests.
So Heather, we've got another question in the queue here, and it is, what are some best practices for putting one's irrigation system to bed for the season?
Well, I think, you know, the biggest thing is making sure that it's blown out or cleaned out, that there's no water left in the lines. So that's, you know, depending on what kind of system you have, you know, you want to make sure that you can get the water, majority of the water out of the lines, obviously, so it doesn't freeze and expand and break your lines. So we don't pick any of our lines up in the hop yard, but if you have a header on top of the ground, you know, some people disconnect that and roll it up for the winter. You know, again, this depends on your size and scale. If the line's buried in the ground, obviously you're not going to do that. You know, but disconnecting, you know, your different meters and pieces like that, your dosatrons, if you're putting fertility through the system, just getting those inside and protected is important. But, you know, most of the irrigation setups are meant to kind of stay out there. But, you know, that's another spring maintenance, going out and kind of looking to see where the mice or the deer or, you know, the rodents or the mowers, you know, where they clip the irrigation and what needs to be replaced.
Great. Any other questions for Erica or Scott or Heather? Just give us a couple of seconds if you're typing. I'm not seeing anything. So last month's webinar, what we did is we opened the lines up to you, our participants, so that you could share some of your feedback about, particular challenges that you faced this season or what went really well. So if you'd like to do that, that might be a fun thing to do this time. So would anyone like to volunteer or share what worked really well or needed some feedback on?
Yeah, this is Heather. I was just going to say, it would also be nice, for folks that participated in our kind of pilot Go Scout program, it would be nice to, and Hop Power Hour, just to know if this is something people enjoyed. Should we do it again? Are there topics that people would like to hear about? And also topics for our winter conference, especially, given this season or just, issues you've had. So any of those things are open too. We'd love to have that kind of information to make all of this, more meaningful to you.
Great. So Chad has something to share about weed control and fertilizer. So Chad, let's see if this works. Hi, Chad.
Can you guys hear me?
I can. We can.
Great. So just something that's really worked for me that I share with a lot of people that seem to be hearing it from the first time for me. I figured I'd share it here. But we use Urea Ammonium Nitrate for weed control as well as fertilization. So it's almost like a two birds with one stone type thing. UAN 32 is basically just straight nitrogen 32%. So it's a 3200. It comes in a liquid form that you put right into your sprayer. We happen to use an ATV sprayer from Tractor Supply, and you can just go right in and put it right on top of your rows. And because it's so concentrated, it burns, but it doesn't burn the woodiness of the hops. So it kills weeds. If you get behind, it kills the weeds and it'll fertilize everything at the same time. The one thing I would caution for is not using too much. If you use too much, you actually over fertilize and things just leach out into the ground. But that's something that's worked well for us and others that I just wanted to share with the group.
Thanks for sharing that, Chad. Other folks? Maybe you can just type in what you'd plan to share in the chat, and then I'll just open up your mic for you. Oh, Gina's asking, Chad, I'm going to unmute you again. What rate did you use?
I'm sorry, what rate?
What rate for the UAN?
Yeah, it was really a visual thing. I didn't really calculate weights because I was really going for weeds. So where there was more, the monocot grass type things, I would hit them a little harder. So it was just kind of a visual thing. But it ended up working out to be somewhere, I believe, around 4 to 5 gallons per row for us. And our rows are about 500 feet long. So a gallon per 100 feet. I would guesstimate.
Okay, great.
And does anyone there have any feedback about what I just said? Like Heather or anyone else there, pros and cons of what we're doing?
Yeah, I mean, it's a pretty common practice in certain crops to kind of burn back foliage. And Jean, do you folks use that in wheat too? For some reason, I was just thinking that when Chad was mentioning that. But yeah, I mean, it's a pretty common practice in some crops to do both. Kind of use it as a weed control and fertility management. But as you mentioned, you got to be careful. I mean, hops are a bit of a higher value crop, so you can err a little bit on the side of doing a bit too much, but yeah, just environmentally, I guess you need to be careful. And at some point you could also, I'm sure, hurt your crop.
And Gene just typed in that he hasn't done that yet.
Has been so many questions on weed control in hops. I was thinking that'd be a great topic for our winter conference, kind of thinking about all the different strategies that are out there And also knowing that it's pretty limited, you know, from herbicide to mechanical to, you know, there's just not a lot of strategies out there. And I think that's really frustrating to people trying to get products labeled. And even those that are labeled are, you know, herbicide wise are pretty restrictive when you can spray them, and, you know, you can do a lot of damage real quick if you don't follow the label. But if anybody has experience using different herbicides, I'm sure others would like to hear about that right now. If anybody has anything to add, either in the chat box or comments.
Oh, wait. Let's see. Doug says discussing weed management at winter meeting would be great. Don't have much to add. Oh, okay. So Ron says this is a little bit off topic than weed management. I had so much dry matter, so I just cut everything back because last year I left the old material and had a lot of late season fall dry matter. I think that bit me in the butt this season.
That again.
Oh, I'm
Deb?
sorry, not dry matter, Downey Mildew. Sorry.
Oh.
Too many DMs.
Well, so, you know, no, that's fine. Downey Mildew, you know, it only survives on living plant material. So it actually, you know, if it's systemic, then it's basically found its way into your hop crown, which then, you know, you have it forever. So, you know, I mean, ultimately, you know, I remember David Gent saying, and maybe he says this in his presentation too, is, you know, those first few years are so critical for Downey mildew management and to be on top of it, because, you know, the longer you can kind of keep it out of your yard and becoming systemic, you know, the healthier your yard will be, obviously higher yields and longer living. And so, you know, a word of caution to folks that are just getting started, if you're buying disease-free plant material, and hopefully it's Downey mildew-free plant material, not just viruses and viroids, that, you know, you're taking all the proper steps and precautions to manage Downey mildew to keep it out of your yard as long as you can. So, because I think Ron, myself, another farmer in Vermont, you know, we kind of experienced that Downey mildew takeover this year in our older yards, and there was no stopping it regardless. So cautionary message.
And Ron just, you know, had typed in terms of control, he just cut back all the Downey mildew right to the ground. So that was.
Yeah, we did the same thing, and one of our yards we had already really terminated it, and the second yard we hadn't really planned to do that this year. We were going to wait another year, but we did end up terminating most of it, and I'm kind of going back and forth. Should I terminate the entire yard, or should I see what happens next year? So I'm curious to see what happens next year. Not sure if I would tell everybody to do that, but.
So do you have any advice, Heather or Scott, on any types of controls for cone tip blight, or anybody on the line here?
You know, I've asked, oh, did somebody have a suggestion?
No.
So one of the things that we noticed in our research when we were doing Downey mildew research and looking at organic fungicides was that the plots that were sprayed with copper, which tends to be a general kind of a general fungicide. Okay, so it's not a specific, you know, it's not specifically targeting one specific fungi. It seemed to actually hold back the cone disease too. And, once we stopped spraying copper because we were getting close to harvest, those were the plots that had the least amount of alternaria at harvest. So there was some, I don't know if it was some residual effectiveness, or there was effectiveness over time against alternaria. So it just kind of made me curious, and we haven't looked at this, but, especially for folks using more conventional fungicides, if there is a place for copper in the mix, especially maybe later in the season. So that's yet to be determined. But I think some of the more specific fungicides, that are specific to downy mildew may not be targeting that particular pest. But there hasn't been a lot of work done on it because it's not a big, it's not a huge deal anywhere else. I'd like to hear what other people have experienced as well.
Does anyone want to chime in? I'm not seeing anybody. Any other questions or feedback, comments? Too hot. It's too hot to comment today.
Yeah, no kidding. I'm glad I'm inside right now, actually. I was outside and so I I will say that for the folks that provided us plant material for the hop kind of historic hop germplasm project that we're doing, I was pleasantly surprised that we actually were able to harvest quite a bit off from most of the 14 varieties that we received from folks. So we're going to send those in for hop oil testing and quality analysis to see what the profiles look like on some of these older strains that were pulled out of, the woods in different places. So if anybody has material that they would like to add to that study, we'd be happy to have it. I'm hoping we have a new plant geneticist at UVM, and he's very interested in working with hops. And so one of his first projects that he wants to do is actually look at the molecular makeup of these historic hop lines that we have, so that we can see if they kind of track the lineage, I guess, of New England Northeast historic hops, and then also, compare them to current genetics as well. So I'm kind of excited about that, to see where that goes.
And if someone was interested, Heather, just get in contact with you directly?
Yeah, we've had a few more folks that have that don't grow hops, but recently have called, and we're gonna try to get out there and get some rhizomes. If Gene's on the line, his was very, very productive. That was one that, and they also, the interesting thing was that we didn't see hardly any downy mildew on those plants, but there was a lot of late season cone disease. And so we're trying to get that ID'd to see what that was. But overall, the plants were pretty healthy all season long.
Jean says smiley face. Did I miss anybody's questions? Any other questions? We still have about 10 minutes.
I want to know what we can, if folks want to do the Go Scout again, or how can we improve that? Do we want to do Hop Power Hour again? And, just sending us feedback would be great. I'm sure we'll do some kind of survey, but, it would be nice to know if it's helpful. We want it to be helpful to you and also to us.
Heather, I think this is a perfect time to remind folks that the last Go Scout was just sent to them. The invitation to take part in the last Go Scout was just sent to them last week. And that hopefully can address some of the questions that you were just asking. And also I will be harassing folks to respond to that, just so that we can get the feedback from as many folks as possible who have taken part at various points during the season, both the Go Scout and the Hops Power Hours, either watching them live and participating or watching them after the fact, streaming on YouTube.
Great. And we had some feedback that Power Hour is, yes, absolutely helpful. There's a couple of questions that came in too. So what's the best way to deal with apple mosaic virus?
I don't really think you can do anything to eliminate it once it's there. You likely have to remove the plants. You can't treat for it. I know there was another grower that had that in their yard. Maybe that's the one asking, but it was a long time ago. And I really just think they have to be removed.
Okay. Bummer. When does UVM start its Northeast hop breeding program? That's the project.
That'd be.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, like I said, there's a gentleman that just started literally like a month ago, and he's got a strong interest in hops. And, we have been trying very hard to secure funding from the USDA to have a hop focused breeding program basically between the Northeast and North Central states. And we'll be trying again to secure that funding here. The call for proposals just came out. And I think most folks know there's only one public hop plant breeder for the USDA in the entire country, and he's only 80% time. So, then there's another one at Oregon State, but he's funded through industry dollars. So there's not a lot of public breeding in hops, so it would certainly be useful to have another person funded in our region or the North Central region to focus just on this location. I absolutely agree with that, and we're trying to move that direction. We are also starting to work with Tufts University in Massachusetts that has a strong interest in understanding the terroir of hops in our region, and they've done similar work in tea, not in our region, but have a strong desire to work with us on evaluating those sort of same terroir principles for hops. So hopefully we'll be pulling them into our project. I'm actually headed down there this week to talk with them. So that's also exciting. So for the varieties that we are growing, are they truly, producing unique flavor profiles for this area, or, a particular farm or a particular state? And, that also I think will be helpful for folks from a marketing perspective as well.
Cool beans. Any other questions, comments? Final words of wisdom?
This is not wisdom, but it's a question I had for other folks. Just how do people feel their hops kind of matured this season? It seemed a bit different than normal, kind of, and the oil or flavors and the aromas just seem to develop, seem more slowly. And I don't know if other people noticed that as well. I don't know if it was the cool weather and the all the moisture, but it just seemed like things were very different from that perspective too. I don't know if anyone else.
Yeah, Ron says zero quality in our area, and Chad said slow start indeed.
Yeah. Okay.
Anybody else care to chime in? I don't see any.
Yeah, it seemed
Yeah.
like things were ready, but or could have been harvested, but the aromas weren't quite there. I don't know if it's a lack of heat. I don't know. Anyway, it was one for the record books.
In general, folks who have started to respond to the final Go Scout, where we ask, in general, how did the season go? Most of the respondents either said good, and then we had a few poor. So there were no growers out there saying they had an excellent year, but most of them said that it was a good year. Certainly some growers, like Heather was mentioning, with maybe more mature yards, had poor years.
Jean says aromas did develop fairly slowly. Luckily, we waited to harvest. And Ron says, when I'm taller than the hops, then you know the hops are in trouble. Yikes.
Yeah. Well, we can only hope for a better year. My husband, he wanted to come up with a name for our strawberries one year, and he said, maybe we'll call them better than last year's berries. So, so maybe that'll be our new farm name, better than last year's hops.
It's a great idea. Anything else? Any other feedback? Questions? Not seeing anything in the queue here.
Well, I will take this last opportunity to thank everybody who has participated in any part of the project. And again, please respond to that final survey that just went out, because it will give us not only a flavor for how things went for you at harvest and the end of the season, but also a chance to improve on this program and as Heather mentioned, give us an opportunity to address the issues that you've identified are most important in your hop yard management. So again, please go ahead and fill out that Survey Monkey that was sent to you.
Excellent. Great. Well, if there's no further questions, we will bid you adieu. All right. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Yep.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.